Hello, hello. All right. We're live. Got 5 people. We've got Victorian Transport videos in the chat. We've got Andrew T. and we've got Patrick Robertson. And we've got Albert. Hello, everyone. Oh, 7 people now. Well, we will get started. You're editing a video, are you, Victorian Transport videos? What are you editing? So, g'day, Andrew. Starting with channel updates. Firstly, I'd like to draw everyone's attention to the recommended other videos playlist, where I talked about that last live stream, but I'd like to point out the one Urbex related video that is in there is from my good mate Richie from Urbex Gecko, and it's some awesome footage of this massive power station that I'll put my video out in a few weeks' time. Awesome place, but Richie went there when there was fog, when the whole place was covered in fog, and it was sunrise. So it's really cool footage. Definitely check that out after the stream or whenever you get a chance. I'd also like to point out that the thumbnail in my previous live stream, I stated that it was Patchwollock, or Patchwollock, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce it, one or two. It's not Patchwollock. You know what, I'm going to call it Patchy Bollock from now on. It's not that, despite what I said, it's actually Hopeton. They're both the same line. It's just that the railway only goes as far as Hopeton these days, but it used to go as far as Patchy Bollock. But yeah, the good shed is indeed Hopeton. Still worth checking out if you're in the area. So is Patchy Bollock. But yeah, Hopeton has a very nice campsite as well. So there's that. Now some updates to my all lines map. I've decided that this will be a recurring theme in the channel update section of the live stream, is any changes I've made to my all lines map, just so you can really see how much it's evolving over time. I've started to put in tracks for the Maribyrnong Explosives Reserve, although that's a really complicated little system there of a tramway. And so, yeah, I'm basically chasing up a proper map that's been made by people who have been there years ago, documented all the railways and stuff, or tramways, I should say. But yes, until I get that, you won't see much further change on my map. And of course, I'll let you know when there is a big change. I have, although in a different explosives reserve, the Truganina Explosives Reserve, I have started to lay out some significant amount of track in those. If I just look at my map to see exactly how much I've done. Yeah, so it looks like I've marked out where there's tracks remaining on it, and a couple of tracks that used to go inside the loading shed, but I haven't got any other of the tracks marked out on the main Truganina Explosives Reserve. Having said that, as part of the reserve, there's sort of like two separate parts of it. There was the main part in Truganina. Then there was the section in Altona, which was labelled, well, today you can sort of see the area just on normal Google Maps because it's labelled Truganina Park. But on my map, I've drawn out the full set of railways tramways that was there, including the connection to the main railway at Laverton. So yeah, that's a cool little thing, and not too many people know that it's there, or was there. Swanson Dock. I've been searching for ages for a good reference as to where the old tracks were that used to go there, but yeah, I found one thanks to John Paff, who has done a similar project to me in mapping out a lot of lines. You might have seen his work under the name Hairy Legs. And we will be working together in the future for both of our mapping projects. So yeah, Finesford over in Geelong. I've done a decent amount of rough mapping out there. John Paff has done a better job than me, and I'll be accessing his work when I get to that. And in another part of Geelong, Moolap, I have drawn out the connecting tramway between the Cheetham Salt Works and the main line, which is connected just like South Geelong, I think. Give me a second, I'll double check that for you all. Yeah, it didn't really connect to any station. There was a siding near Wilson's Road in the Geelong suburb of Moolap, I'm pretty sure that is. Came off the line to Queenscliff and yeah, went to Cheetham. Cheetham also had a significant tramway in Laverton, but I'm yet to map that out. And finally, on the map update side of things, I have reclassified part of the Spotswood oil siding. Previously I had it as destroyed alignment, but I've reclassified a section of it to rail trail. It's not officially labelled as such, but there's a bike path that pretty much follows the path of it along this street. Douglas Parade, yes. So it continues along Douglas Parade, passes under what is now the Westgate Bridge. And yeah, there's just a little section that you can't access at the very end that I've kept as destroyed alignment near what is now called the Yarraville Oil Terminal. But that was also known at one point as the Holden Oil Dock. And yeah, the rest of it you can still actually pretty clearly see just based on the satellite view of where it used to go. But yeah, you definitely can't walk it though. It's all fenced off and it's within the various industrial places there. Although there is, just alongside the track from Spotswood to Newport, there is a section of abandoned track. I've labelled as disused track in my map, but yeah, whatever. two words for the same thing. Yeah, I do plan to do a video on that sometime, now that there's actually a significant amount remaining. Well, not remaining, but still walkable, I guess. And I'm yet to reclassify Newport Oil Dock, but that will happen in the next few days. Again, to Rail Trail at the very end. So, it's a lot of updates, but yeah, there you go. Been working a bit on the map. Now, into the main topic, which is memories, extra memories from Queensland. Of course, I'm talking about my trip to Queensland, which I went on in July last year. Wish I could have gone back to Queensland this year, but oh well. Things happen. But yeah, I'll just be talking about anything that wasn't really mentioned in my video series for whatever reason. But I'd still like to record, and yeah, you can hear all about it. So we're also going to be, I just should mention that we're going to be jumping around a lot. There's no real order to these memories. They're just sort of in order that I thought of them, and have jotted them down. So we're starting off in the town of Mount Isa. Mount Isa is the terminus of the Inlander train, and any other trains which go on that line. But yeah, the one thing that I wanted to specifically draw attention to was the road trains. Now, of course, road trains are present throughout Queensland, especially, but I felt I was you get different sorts of road trains in different parts of Queensland, right? And I was most aware of them, if you like, in Mount Isa. Not only because of the sheer number of them, but the length, and just walking around the town. As I'll discuss later on, Mount Isa had very wide streets and reasonably narrow footpaths, no real nature strips or anything like that. Patrick says very scary to overtake a road train. Yes, and I'll tell you what, it's even scarier standing on the footpath when a massive one drives right past you. Now, Mount Isa's biggest industry is mining, of course, and so the most common road train that you saw in Mount Isa was carrying mineral products of some sort, or going to collect mineral products. And so they were four-sectioned. They had four trailers, I guess you could call them. They weren't all the same length. From memory, there was like a medium one, then a short one, then two long ones. But still, yeah, they were the biggest and heaviest road trains in Queensland. I think I saw one at one point, which was one of those big road trains carrying another big road train. So that was something to see as well. But yeah, that was one thing that really surprised me when I edited my video on Mount Isa, was that I didn't really film all of that, and yet that was one of my strongest memories of the town, was just having these massive road trains pass by you at such close proximity. Yeah, it was a little bit scary, even though you know logically that you're on the footpath, they're on the road, there's no huge risk of them hitting you, but still, it was a bit scary. I'm used to Melbourne and most other towns and cities in Australia have a decent amount of nature strip, or at least wider footpaths. And Mount Isa had very wide streets, but footpaths were not wide. So yeah, there was just, Mount Isa was one of the towns where I had to do the most walking. I think that my caravan park, the caravan park where I was staying, was like a 40-minute walk from the station and a 20-odd minute walk from the centre of town. So the station itself was again 20 minutes from town, and then station, centre of town, caravan park. 20. So yeah, it was. I only really walked the full 40 minutes. I was about to say 40 kilometres. Wasn't that far. I was about to walk. I only walked the full 40 minutes, maybe once or twice. But usually it was just back and forth into town, out to the caravan park in the morning. But still, it felt like a lot of walking. And especially when you've got the big, heavy backpack. I think I stated in one of my videos that it was my fully laden pack was 25 kilos. That's not to say I was always carrying around that much, but when I was shifting significantly from one spot to another, yes, I had to carry the full 25 kilos. And if you've ever carried that much weight on your back, you know that you are certainly not as manoeuvrable as you normally are. And that didn't help my internal fears of road trains hitting me. But yeah, I still found them fascinating at the same time. And yeah, when they were parked and I was in awe standing beside them and seeing their huge size. That goes for trains as well. I'm always in awe of how big they are, because you never think of them as that big. But yeah, because you're always sort of further away. Andrew T says, it's surprising how many trains in Australia have the word lander in it. Yes, you're right. I think there was a couple of people, I could be wrong on this, definitely in Queensland, all of their lander trains were pretty much one person was responsible for the naming of all of them. In terms of elsewhere in Australia, lander trains are definitely still popular. And I'm not sure to what degree that was just a cultural thing or where exactly that came from. Would be an interesting further investigation. Rob Ozzie says, hey Floyd, what did you think of the Westlander? I thought it was really good. And let me just check. I'm going to be talking about that. Yes, I am. Further on in the live stream, I'll talk a bit about the Inlander and the Westlander, because they have two very similar trains and sort of how I compared them and stuff. But yeah, I like both of them. Rob also says, Longreach is a nice town. Yes, I very much enjoyed Longreach as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Patrick says, I've been to Longreach to see the Stockman's Hall of Fame, but should have visited the Qantas Museum. Yeah, that's interesting because I basically did the opposite, right? I visited the Qantas Museum, but not the Stockman's Hall of Fame. I was aware of it before going to Longreach, but I didn't really think much of it before going to Longreach, or before going to Queensland, really. And then I started chatting to people and hearing lots of good reports of it. And so I thought, oh yeah, well, I'm definitely going to prioritise the Qantas Museum because I'd already paid for that. Actually, had I? No, I hadn't. But that was definitely the plan, was to go there and pay for a platinum tour. And I thought, if I've got time at the end of the day, because I only had one day in Longreach, then I will go to the Stockman's Hall of Fame. Otherwise, I'll have to do it next time. And that's what ended up happening, was that I just spent all day at the Qantas Museum. Yeah, and just worth mentioning there that I basically, with Mount Isa and Longreach, I mentioned this in my planning episode, that I could pretty much choose whether I wanted one day in Longreach, in Mount Isa, and 2 days in Longreach, or the other way around, 2 days in Mount Isa, 1 day in Longreach, and I chose the latter. Yeah, it's just the way it turned out. But I'd definitely like to, in a future trip to Queensland, go back to Longreach and visit the Stockman's Hall of Fame. G'day, High Nose Transport Films. G'day, Brian from the USA. All right. Yes, so another memory from Mount Isa was the Hard Times mining tour. I didn't really talk about that in my Mount Isa episode. I can't remember if I talked about it in my planning episode, but oh well, I'll repeat it now. That was an interesting tour. I'd been on a couple of mining tours elsewhere in Australia, and the Hard Times tour was rather expensive. I think it was like $80 or something. And I was a bit hesitant as to whether I wanted to do it or not. But reading all the reviews online, there was a lot of people saying it was the best mining tour they had ever been on. So I thought, okay, I'll take the chance. And again, when I was travelling throughout Queensland and speaking to various people, a couple of people did say, oh yeah, the Hard Times mining tour is actually pretty good. And now, since I've done it, what do I think? I thought it was great. Well worth the money, actually. One of the coolest things that I learned on the tour was that they used to do tours in the real mine, but then what happened was one day a lady slipped and hurt her ankle. I think she sprained it, or maybe she even broke it. I can't quite remember. But she hurt her ankle in some fashion in the main mine and sued them for it. I'm not sure whether she won or not. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm not sure whether she won the case or not, but either way, the result was that the mine said, that's it, we're not doing any more tours in the mine because we don't want that liability. And fair enough. Rob says she broke it. You think you read about it. Okay. And so, yeah, the mayor of the town, who happened to be an ex-miner himself, I think. Maybe I got that wrong. Actually, I don't think so. I don't think he was an ex-miner, but he recognised that the town mining was the town's biggest industry, and the second biggest industry was tourism. And so he said, we definitely need some way of combining the two. You know, we need a mining tour of some sort. Now, the main commercial mine won't do it. So what's our options? Well, he gathered up a bunch of ex-miners and got permission to build a fake mine, or not fake, but a purpose-built mine, I guess, in the middle of Mount Isa, using old mining equipment, because that was what the mines were happy to supply old equipment to them. So they used explosives, and they dug out a purpose-built mine in the middle of the city for the purposes of tours. So for all intents and purposes, it is a real mine. Although they didn't find any horses or anything like that when they dug it out. But it gives you a real sense of a modern mine, not because I think that's a big distinction between Mount Isa and a lot of other mining tours around Australia, is that they're often old mines, usually 19th century mines, whereas this one was really a true late 20th century, 21st century mine. So, yeah, all the stuff which goes along with that. And I thought that was one of the coolest parts. You go down in a mining elevator, you get proper sort of safety briefings and that sort of thing. And you get to operate a few tools like I don't know what to call it. It's some like jackhammer drill type thing. You're not actually drilling, but they do fire it up, and you can sort of just feel the vibrations of it. And yeah, it's run by volunteers who are ex-miners themselves usually, so they've got a lot of cool stories to tell and lots of little things which you just might not necessarily think about, like the direction of airflow, how to get fresh air into a mine. They're saying that, the exhaust fans, they're always pulling bad air out, not pumping fresh air in. So yeah. Jackhammer it is, says Rob. Cool. Rob says, and Man Isa was in use as in the Slim Dusty movie. Oh, cool. Brian said, that could never happen here. People have to have a week's worth of government standardised safety training just to set foot underground. I'd like to go on a tour like that. I work at the Stone Mine in our local mountain and have a lot of stories. Airflow is definitely a challenge. Yeah. And of course I've spoken to you, so I already knew that, but yeah, you definitely know a lot. And yes, it's not a full safety briefing. If you ever go to the real proper working mine, yes, you do have to go through at least a week's worth of training. But this is like a tourist mine. But there's a lot of systems that are in place that, this is only a small mine. I think they said it's only about 1 kilometre or so in total length, but they use a few of the systems derived from the proper mines, such as the tag system, where all your tags are hanging up on a wall, and when you go underground, you take your tag with you, and you don't put that tag back until you've come up and to Australia, what am I talking about? To above ground, and put your tag back on the shelf, on the hook. So that way they know if anyone's tags are missing, then they must be underground. So yeah, and when you're down there, you get taught about some things that would be included in a proper working mine safety briefing, but aren't necessary for just a tourist mine, such as large-scale fires and whatnot, and how to shelter from fires and whatnot. But yeah, I said you go down underground in an elevator, you get transported back up on the back of a Land Cruiser. That I think is a really cool thing because, well, Brian, I know you've got the fancy Land Cruisers in the US, but I believe that you don't have the 70 series, the bare bones Land Cruisers that are designed for the harsh conditions, the real harsh conditions, the mining and the agriculture. But yeah, that was a good thing. I could talk for half an hour just on the tour. It was that good. So yeah, I'll move on now. But yeah, definitely recommend it if you go to Mount Isa. The library in Mount Isa, that's something I wasn't necessarily expecting to be anything fancy, but yeah, indeed. The library's got some cool architecture, and I spent a bit of time in the library just because I thought it was cool. And I think I needed to charge some stuff up as well. But yeah, I guess I'd describe the architecture as brutalist. But it's, yeah, not to everyone's tastes, but I like it. Patrick says the Beaconsfield mine is in Tassie had the clock on the cards. Oh, interesting. Rob asks, did you go to the Walkabout Creek Hotel? No, I didn't. But yeah, maybe I should visit there next time. Brian said, our mine pools go right inside the side of the mountain. We use the tag system. We don't have any special vehicles. We have pickup trucks and an old bus to get us in and out of the mine. Yeah, it's the Land Cruiser 70 series that the mines use. They come in a ute variant, which you'd call pickup, of course. They come in a standard wagon form, and they also come in the classic trip carrier form. All of them are really used in the mining industry, but especially in the outback, you'll see heaps of Land Cruiser 70 series, just because they're so tough and reliable. Yeah, it's pretty much the only reason why we actually have them, because there's so much demand from the mining industry. And there's different mines in Australia that operate on different principles, but a lot of the outback mines will have like troop carriers and stuff, which are outfitted just to take lots of people down into the underground. Brian says, my roof bolter machine and the stone hauling trucks have reinforced cabs. Yeah, well, the Land Cruisers, they're not specifically built. They're sort of built for agriculture as stock standard, but they come with a few factory options like bull bars, roll cages, that sort of thing, so that they can be made to mine spec. Yeah, that's another big industry, is just the outfitting of these vehicles for mining use in Australia. Rob says, yeah, it was used in Crocodile Dundee. It's not far out of Mount Isa going towards Winton. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yeah, because I wasn't in my car, I couldn't really travel too far. That was the one thing that I really missed in Queensland, was having a car. Although I know that it wasn't practical given the style of trip that I was doing, yeah, I still wish that I had a car. Brian said, I wish my company allowed me to film and take pictures of a whole YouTube channel of the stuff, since I work a different job every day around there. Yeah, that'd be really interesting. I think that would be a fairly common occurrence, though, in mines around the world, that, yeah, they don't really want to have people filming and whatever. NPG says, lest we forget, falling in conflict. Yes, absolutely. Patrick says, Floyd Bromley, if you check out my videos, you will see why Nissan and Toyota have a good reputation in the bush and the outback. Oh, yeah. I do actually quite enjoy following the four-wheel drive industry and that sort of thing. I hope to get a four-wheel drive of my own someday. Well, it'll probably be my next car. This is going to be a four-wheel drive, because I've got a taste in it of it in my Subaru Outback. But yes, Toyotas and Nissan Patrols specifically have a very good reputation. Rob says, did I go on the Savannah Lander on the train from Cairns to Forsyth? No, I didn't. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Considering Andrew says how much we're talking about the Army troop carriers. Yeah. Although I believe the Australian Defence Force, they have never really used Land Cruisers, despite them being super popular. They've always used either Land Rover Defenders or, more recently, Mercedes G-Wagon. But yeah, it has definitely, the troop carrier was named from carrying troops, more so with other governments than Australian governments. Rob says, if you ever want to interview the driver of it, Floyd, I can get him to follow you on YouTube. Oh, cool. Yeah, I might take you up on that whenever I'm next visiting Queensland, because I definitely plan to go on those trains then. Moving on. Winton, the town of Winton. So everyone, I think I said this in my planning video, was that when I was sort of planning out my trip, and I was talking to various people that I knew, saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, a common question that I got asked was, are you going to Winton? And I always said no. was going to be on my list for next time. But then, when I was in Queensland, I checked the bus timetable from Mount Isa to Longreach that I was going on, and I saw, actually, we're going to be stopping in Winton for a full hour. It's not uncommon for buses, long-distance buses in Queensland, to stop periodically for half an hour or so generally, just so you can stop to go to the toilet, grab some food, stretch your legs, whatever. But it's unusual for them to stop for a full hour, but they were going to do it in Winton. So I thought, brilliant, I can take advantage of that. And so when we got to Winton, the bus driver said, you know, you've got an hour, but be back by 50 minutes, please. And so the first thing I did was I went to the shops and saw what there was available to purchase food-wise. And the local pub was selling hamburgers off the street. So I thought, beauty, I'll grab myself one of them. And I immediately went straight to the station. And I think, Rob, you asked whether I made a video on Longreach at all. Yes, I did. I think it was part 7. Let me just check that. I've got a whole playlist. If you go to my playlist section on my channel, I've got a whole playlist for the Queensland by rail videos. It's not loading. Oh, it is now. Part 7. Spirit of the Outback, first class. Yes. So that's where I have the video of Longreach, and there's also a little bit of it in part 6, I believe, which is the inlander to Mount Isa. So yeah, I did that and I checked out the station. I really felt at the end of that I had seen everything that I really wanted to see in Winton. So for a future trip, it's definitely not going to be a primary destination. But if I happen to be passing through, if I have the chance to stop there, yeah, sure, I will. But one thing that I didn't have when I was in Winton was water. I think I bought myself a can of Coke or something like that at the pub, but I didn't have any water from Winton. Now, Winton's got a bit of a bad reputation in regards to water because it has a high sulphur content. And so, unstable connection, and we're back. Yeah, so apparently there's signs in all the hotels and whatnot saying, don't worry, the water might not taste very good or smell very good, but it's safe to drink. But anyway, I was speaking to a lady on the Spirit of the Outback, and she was convinced, because she'd been to Winton before, and she was convinced that she had gotten sick from drinking the water, gotten gastro or something from drinking the water in Winton. Probably just a coincidence, an unfortunate coincidence, but yeah, just goes to show you people don't necessarily like it. And that brings us on nicely to my next point, which is just about the people that you meet in general while traveling. That is one of the best parts about travel, in my opinion, is just talking to people that you meet along the way. Of course, I met many people along the way. Unfortunately, I didn't have any business cards at the time. I've got them right in front of me, actually. You can see there. I produced these after I left Queensland. But yeah, because I wanted to have them ready beforehand, but I didn't get the time, and I wish I did, because there were so many missed opportunities of, you know, telling people, hey, I've got a YouTube channel and here's a business card, you can go watch my adventures when they come out. Oh well, I've got them for next time. But yeah, just some a couple of memorable people that I met along the way. The first person was, his name is Matty. Matthew is his full name, obviously, but nickname Matty. He is, I don't know how old he is exactly, but he's in his 20s or early 30s. But anyway, he's a bit of a rail fan, and I met him on the Westlander, and yeah, we got along well, and we ended up meeting up again when I got back to Brisbane later in my trip. So yeah, he's a cool dude, and I'll probably be seeing him next time I'm in Queensland. It just goes to show you that, yeah, you can make good friends when traveling. I also met the second person that was memorable. I've forgotten his name, but he was a pretty young guy, probably only like 12 or 13 or something like that, maybe a bit younger. But he was traveling with his mum on the Spirit of the Outback, I think, yeah. And he was a rail fan as well, or a budding rail fan. And he had a special interest in timetables. But yeah, I got chatting to them, and to him and his mum, and they asked me, you know, how can he get involved in the, you know, are there any other people who are interested in railways type thing? I said, of course there is, and you can get in touch. In Australia, there's a lot of Facebook groups for railway enthusiasts, but his mum wasn't so keen on the Facebook ideas, so I mentioned Railpage, which is a railway forum type thing in Australia. Still in use, but not as much as it was in the past. But yeah, just things like that, just people you meet. It's great. Andrew says he knows Railpage, yeah. It's fairly well known in the Australian railway enthusiasts community. Bus routes around Cairns is my next point. And before we begin this, I think we're definitely going to go over time on this stream. So if anyone has to leave at 10 p.m. or whatever, no worries at all. But yeah, we'll just have to watch the replay tomorrow or whatever. Yeah, bus routes around Cairns. They were interesting because they were very much indirect. They, a trip that would take you 10 minutes in a car to get from the outer suburbs of Cairns into the main CBD would take like half an hour on the bus, because instead of going like that, the bus route would go up and across and down. that's just one example, because I was staying in about here in regards to the city centre there, with that direction being north, west and east in my mind. But yeah, so there's that. And that was cool. It was cool to have the bus routes go such an indirect route, because I could really see a lot of Cairns that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to see, especially the outer boundaries of it, where you've got houses on one side and cane fields on the other. I always liked the boundary between developed and undeveloped. Cane railways were a significant part of Cairns and the northern unstable connection. And we're back. Yeah, cane railways were a significant part of Cairns and the north coastal parts of Queensland. So, yeah, that was. I showed in my, I think, part 5 video of Queensland by Rail, where I was wandering around Cairns, and that I had a little bit of a walk along one of the cane lines. Didn't see a cane train, unfortunately, but that's something I want to achieve next time I go up to Queensland, is photograph a couple of cane trains. But it was very cool just to see how it's a real remnant of the past in a lot of ways. Tramways used to be such a huge part of Australian industry, and now it's only really the cane railways that you can also call them tramways, that form a significant part of the tramway kilometres that are in use today. And yeah, interesting to note is that all the cane trains are basically all, apart from a couple of exceptions, they're all 2-foot gauge. And it's sort of the standard gauge of tramways, but it obviously differs from the main railways of Queensland, the Queensland government railways, which were all 3'6". They're both narrow gauge technically, but obviously 2 foot's a lot narrower than 3'6". It just goes to show you that even Queensland, which was probably the most gauge homogenous state of them all, apart from maybe Western Australia, even they succumbed to the good old break of gauge problem. But it works. I think Queensland have it the best these days, because the cane railways and the main railways are relatively separate, although they definitely do crisscross over themselves a lot. And that was also another unique thing. And just the construction of them in general, like is more so than they do. Oh my God. Chester bridges more than culverts. So yeah. I never really knew. And we're back. Don't know why it keeps dropping out, but oh well. Actually, give me a sec. Let me just check something. Yeah, I thought something might be going on, but yeah, we'll have to deal with the disruptions for now. Anyway, yeah, cane railways were a significant part of the North Coast, and well, still are, and I'd definitely like to explore that more on the next trip to Queensland. So my next point that I'd like to talk about is regional city versus country town. This is a bit of an internal debate in my mind. What is the distinction for me between what I would call a regional city and a country town, or regional town, whatever you want to call it? I think that it's worth making the distinction. You'll often hear them used interchangeably, those two terms used interchangeably in the media, but yeah, I think that it's really about the feel. When you go there, does it feel like a country town? Does it feel quiet? Does it feel quaint? Or does it feel really bustling like a city? Yeah. And so I guess I'll give some Victorian examples first, and then move on to the Queensland examples. Geelong, definitely a regional city. In Victoria, in terms of my definition, it feels very much like a city. Ballarat feels more like a country town. Bendigo, on the other hand, I would classify more as a regional city. Even though Bendigo has a smaller population than Ballarat, I just feel like when you go there, Bendigo feels more like a city, Ballarat feels more like a town. You might differ, but that's just my opinion. So in terms of Queensland, Cairns, most definitely a regional city. I don't think anyone's really doubting that one, considering they've got high-rises and stuff. Not huge high-rises, but still. The more interesting ones, I think, are Longreach, Mount Isa, and Charleville. Mount Isa, regional city, for sure. It felt bustling. It didn't feel quiet in any way. It felt noisy, again, like a city. It's not to say that it was bad. I very much enjoyed Mount Isa, but it was just different. Longreach felt almost in between. It definitely wasn't as loud and as bustling as Mount Isa, but it wasn't as quiet and peaceful as Charleville, which, there you go, Charleville is a country town in my mind. If I had to pick for Longreach, I'd say country town, but it would be a large country town, a bit like Ballarat, I guess. Has aspects of a city, but on the whole, feels like a town. But yeah, I'd definitely like to spend a bit more time in Longreach. Charleville, I felt like I'd seen pretty much everything that I wanted to see. Again, I'll definitely stop by it again, but probably won't be a primary destination. But we'll see. Mount Isa, again, I think I had enough time there, although it could be, there are a couple of things that I wouldn't mind checking out in Mount Isa again. Now that also brings us nicely onto the Inlander versus the Westlander, which I said I would talk about. They're very similar trains in a lot of ways. And because they both use pretty much identical consists, you know, and they're pretty similar lengths, trips. The Inlander is a bit longer, but interestingly, I felt like it passed by quicker than the Westlander, although perhaps that was because I'd already experienced the Westlander. And again, I could be biased by the idea that, yeah, I went on the Westlander first, not the Inlander. So I might, because the Westlander was so new to me, I might be holding that in a higher regard than I would have with the Inlanders had I done it the other way around. But yeah, I don't think that I'm too biased on that matter. Anyway, the way that I've described it to people is that traveling on the Inlander felt like I was a small fish in a big pond. And by that I mean like it felt like we were very insignificant, and it was a fairly busy line. We were always pulling into a siding or whatever to let a freight train pass, and you know, they were pretty much always mining related, but you know, there'd be mineral ore, there'd be acid, there'd be phosphorus, lots of different types of freight moved along that line. So it was cool, but you definitely felt like you were not second class, but less significant. And that the line was definitely there primarily for the freight. And that you just happened to be committed through goodwill to be there. The Westlander, on the other hand, you sort of, again, felt like a small fish in a big pond, but it was sort of like, no, in fact, I'd almost describe it as a big fish in a big pond with not much other traffic around. It's almost like you were a big fish swimming into an ocean. It didn't feel crowded whatsoever. I mean, neither of the trains, in terms of number of passengers, felt crowded in any sort. I think they both had like 12 passengers at maximum. But the Westlander very much felt like you were going into the outback. Like what you think of as the outback, you think of it as a lonely place where, you know, vast distances with not many people. The Inlander, I felt like I was doing that, but I was hopping between big regional centres that were every couple of 100 Ks. Whereas in the Westlander, I felt like there wasn't any big settlement between Toowoomba and Charleville, really. Inky, whatever your name is, says, when you say second class, do you mean the Western lines and the outback ones? I'm not entirely sure what you're trying to say there, but I didn't feel second class. I mean, obviously the trains were both economy only, but it's not like I felt like we were being treated as second-class citizens or anything like that. But as I describe it, it was sort of like on the Mount Isa, the inlander to Mount Isa, it felt like I was on a train that I felt like definitely the line would exist without the train. Whereas on the Westlander, I sort of felt like the train was half the reason the line existed. Obviously, it carries a bit of freight as well, and it's more likely that the passenger service will disappear before the freight does. But still, I'm just sort of describing what it felt like. And yeah, it felt like it was a big fish on the Westlander travelling into an ocean. You felt like you were really covering vast distances for not much being there. Hinky, whatever says, sorry, I should rephrase that. I meant that it compared to the trains in Victoria. Did you feel like the outback lines were second class compared to the south? I'm still not entirely sure what you mean. In terms of the service that I received, if anything, the Queensland lines were better service. I felt like Victoria and such could learn a lot from Queensland Railways. But yeah, it's just that, yeah, I don't know. I didn't feel like it was too much of a second class in any way, really. I mean, even like the seating itself, just as a pure definition of first class versus second class, yes, it was economy, but as I mentioned, I think in the videos, the carriages are actually ex-first class sitting carriages, so the seats were actually quite comfy, and that was one of the things that I thought that Victoria could really learn from Queensland. Moving on, the Queensland rail crew on different trains. I definitely felt like that was something to take note of. I felt like, and I think I definitely mentioned this in one of my videos, but in case I didn't, if I was around Brisbane or even the Spirit of Queensland to Cairns, I felt like it was very much, everything was busy. Everyone felt like they needed to stick to the rules. Everything felt like protocol. It wasn't not relaxing, but it wasn't the same vibe as you got on the Outback trains. Even the Spirit of the Outback, because it was a busier train, didn't have the same feel from the crew as the Westlander and the Inlander. You definitely felt like, just simply because there were fewer people on board, you got more individual treatment. Like a small example of this would be, and I had finished mine, and the staff came around and said, hey, would you like any more food? There's a few sandwiches left in the fridge. They're just going to be thrown out otherwise, so if anyone would like them, put your hand up. And so I said, oh yeah, I'll have another one. And yeah, it was just little things like that. When you're sitting in the lounge car, there's a staff member sitting there as well, usually, and you just felt like you were both on the same level, and they'd occasionally get up and say, hey, does anyone want anything? everyone just felt like everyone was really appreciative of what the staff were doing and stuff like that. Yeah, everything was just a lot more relaxed, and that was really good. I really loved that. And I've heard reports that similar sorts of things happen in New South Wales, particularly on the, what do you call it? Broken Hill, that's what I'm thinking of. On the Explorer train to Broken Hill, I've heard that that's a train where you get a similar vibe from the staff. I'm obviously yet to experience that personally, because I haven't been to New South Wales extensively by train. But I have travelled around Victoria extensively, and I can't say I've really felt that on any V-line service, at least. There's been a couple of heritage tours which I've definitely felt more relaxed on than others. But yeah, it's a general rule that the further out you go, the more relaxed the crew is, it seems. And it's just that in Victoria, we just don't have lines that go out that far, at least not anymore, not passenger trains. It's quite possible that if we had a train to Mildura, we'd get the same sort of taste of that, but yeah. Hippie whatever says in Queensland there is the only passenger service Queensland Rail, but there is also a variety of freight networks, Pacific National, Watco, Horizon, GrainCorp, I believe BHP. Yes, similar thing in all other states, except, yeah, there's a couple of specific freight networks in Queensland that are the tracks. I should say the infrastructure themselves is owned by the freight network, but generally there's still a lot of government ownership of the infrastructure, especially wherever the passenger trains go. Victorian Transport Films videos says, Floyd, have you been to the Junie Roundhouse? Or sorry for off topic. No, I haven't, but I would like to visit it. Albert says, with the Broken Hill train, it's just because of the distance, much further away from the eyes of management. Yes, good point. That's the other thing, was that even in, I say that you didn't really feel this in on the busier outback trains, but yeah, it's the longer distances and the smaller passenger numbers that both contributed, and the reason that staff are more relaxed are, yes, absolutely, further away from the eyes of management. And you would have seen in my part 5, I believe it is, the Coranda Railway, one of the drivers there called out to me and said, I thought at the time that he was calling me back to tell me off for something. I thought, oh, he's seen me do something that's not quite legal. And like, I think I got up on the loco at one point or something like that, and he's going to tell me off for it. So I was tempted to sort of not turn back, but something in me just went, yeah, all right, let's see what he's got to say. And I'm so glad that I did, because I went back and he said, hey, I saw you photographing the train yesterday. Would you like to come into the cab and have a look around? I said, yes, please. And so you saw my footage from in there. But yeah, there's things like that that, yeah, I was really appreciative of whenever the crew went out of their way, did anything like that, which was not technically by the books. Another example is on the Westlander when the driver said, oh yeah, cross the tracks, go into the yard, take some photos of the train at a good angle. and gave us the circular, things like that. Rarely see it, very rarely see it on Victorian trains. Occasionally you do see it, but very occasionally. Usually they're too scared of management, again. Albert says, got to go. Catch the end of the video when it's uploaded. All right, see you, Albert. Will I see the Spirit of Progress to Sydney, says Victorian Transport Videos, or ride it? I'm unlikely to ride it. It's too expensive. But yeah, I'll quite possibly photograph it, restrictions permitting, whenever it happens. Yeah, next random point, Tiger Air. I flew to Brisbane. I flew to Sydney a bit later in the year, but that was for a different reason, not for railway related. But I flew to Brisbane on Tiger Air, and Tiger Air is no longer. They went bankrupt because of the pandemic, and it's a bit of a shame. Tiger Air definitely got the reputation of being the worst airline, the worst domestic airline in Australia. Obviously, its main competitor was Jetstar, which I believe is still going. That's the Qantas low budget as opposed to Tiger, which was the Virgin low budget. But anyway, I felt that I got better service on Tiger Air than I did from Jetstar. They're both budget airlines, so yeah. I wasn't expecting anything fancy from either of them, but yeah, I don't know. I just thought Tiger, I got a little bit more leg room, a little bit better service. So it's oh well. Jetstar it is next time. Andrew said your Tiger Air flight got overbooked waiting for an hour. Honestly, that could happen to any airline. They quite deliberately overbook almost all of their flights because they know that a certain number of people aren't going to turn up statistically. But then when it happens that everyone does turn up, then they've got to deal with that. Think if you water says, what do you think of the Great Southern that runs from Adelaide to Brisbane, actually, via Melbourne? It's a tourist train. It's a hotel on wheels. If you're into that sort of thing, I'm sure it's great. But okay, I'm just going to call you Josh. Good. Yeah, if you're into that sort of thing, then I'm sure it's great. But in terms of, it's not something that a regular commuter would ever really consider. It's not a replacement for the overland in any real sense, and they've just been highly commercialized. And to be completely honest, I don't think either of the GAN or the Indian Pacific would have survived with being just tourist, with being just commuter trains. But I think it still would have been nice if the governments continued the subsidy of the one carriage that used to be on board, the red service, I believe they call it, for regular commuters and backpackers and that sort of thing. Yeah, shame that that's a decision of the governments, not of Great Southern, the operator, or Journey Beyond, whatever they're called these days. In Sydney, it's a shame that I missed out on the closure of the Carlingford line. That was my one, I guess you could call it the biggest regret of the trip. I wasn't aware at the time that the Carlingford line was closing. So instead I rode a train to Lithgow. A bit crushed that I didn't get to do that, but you know, you are going to miss out on some things sometimes. You can't get to everything. But yeah, still, it's like, damn, I was in Sydney, I had the time, and I didn't know about it, so I didn't get to it. Damn. All right, see if Victorian has the videos. Yeah, and so I've mentioned before, I've mentioned it a little bit throughout, okay, see you, Andrew, throughout this stream, that any future trips to Queensland, things that I would consider. I would definitely like to go on the Savannah Lander and Gulf Lander. Those are definitely going to be priorities for my next trip. But yes, that's going to be priority number one. Priority number two, sort of equal number one, is riding an intercity express train or ICE train to Gympie North. They are in danger of being retired completely, and that was one of the things that I really missed out on in Queensland. I was aware of them. I was aware that they're on their last legs, but I still thought they would be around. I'd planned to visit in July this year, but obviously that doesn't. I'm probably going to be doing it instead in July next year. Hopefully there's still a couple around then, but we'll see. If it really looks like they're going to be retired even earlier, I might even consider a mad dash up to Brisbane just to see them off, but we'll see. And I guess in general I'd appreciate a little bit more time in Brisbane. Hello, Josh. Josh S317, that is. Not big, what do you want to call him? We've got two Joshes in the chat now. So more time in Brisbane is something that I'd like to consider. I definitely felt like I didn't quite cover everything I wanted to cover in Brisbane. I probably could have made more use of my time when I got back to Brisbane for the second time later in my trip, but yeah, I mainly spent that just catching up and hanging out with Les. But in retrospect, I probably should have told Les what we were doing a bit more. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you have to experience the one thing to know that you want to experience the other, if that makes sense. Hinky Josh says, the ICE trains have less than a few months left. Get to see them soon. Well, and we're back. I am following it fairly closely, but come on, reconnect. Back again. It's definitely something I would consider if the borders open up. Yeah, I know it's laggy, Josh Sugarman, but yeah, if the borders open up, I I will quite possibly make a mad dash to Brisbane. We'll see. Finances are dependent on, I should say my trip is dependent on my finances as well. And one other thing he says, Hingy Josh, there's only one ice train left. The others were destroyed for repair parts for the remaining one. I know there's only one left in service at the moment, but I heard something about that some of them might be coming back. But yeah, it is true that they seem to be demising quicker than I perhaps would have thought. Finally, really, actually no, before I move on to that, actually no, it's all part of it. I would definitely like to experience railbed class on the future trip to Queensland, in the spirit of Queensland. That's one thing that I didn't get to experience, and yeah, it would be cool. It would be very cool to do that. And I'm quite possibly going to be, my future trip is going to go either one of two ways. Either I'm going to drive up to Queensland and utilise my car a lot, or I'm going to go and do sort of half Queensland, half New South Wales, and do it almost entirely by rail, not take my car. More likely, I think, the later idea, and I'll leave the car to a third trip to Queensland, but yeah, just something to consider. Josh says to the other Josh, did any EMUs make it to preservation? And Hinty Josh says, yes, so far I think at least 10 have. That's interesting. I thought only one set had, maybe two had made it to preservation, but I could be wrong. And yes, Josh S317, definitely get to Queensland when you can, because it's such a different environment to Victoria. It's really worth the trip. Yeah, I'll probably be getting to if I'm going partially via New South Wales, I'm probably going to get there via Armidale or Moree, and I'm probably going to do the Broken Hill Explorer as well. And we'll see what else I do. Only sort of rough thoughts at the moment. He says, although keeping MU1 and 4 first in service, and there are a variety being sent around the state and even country for preservation. Oh, all right, cool. It's a shame no Intercity Express trains have been earmarked for preservation. Just says, I remember going to Cairns in 2018. Where I stayed was away from the inner Cairns and much nicer. Took a trip up to Cranda, definitely worth a trip. No one thinking of going to Cranda Range. Yes. Of course, the Savannah Lander travels the entire route of the Cranda Railway plus more. And I've heard people say that the Savannah Lander is the closest thing that you can get today to experience a 1960s rail journey. So definitely looking forward to that. Hinge says, last time I was in Cairns was 2012, but the last time I was in Townsville was 2020. There you go. I'd probably like to spend a bit more time in Townsville as well. I didn't really feel like I had enough time there either. But ultimately, trips are all about compromise. So, and your first trip, I've heard others say again, your first trip really sets up what your second trip is going to be like. Because your second trip, you cover everything you missed in the first trip. And yeah, I can definitely see that being true. Yeah, that's about it that I had written down. Geez, we've gone half an hour over time, but that's becoming a common occurrence. We should get it back down to an hour in future streams. While you're all here, I think next week I'll talk about the farewell broad gauge trips that I did in 2017. There was a set of 3 of them that I did, and yeah, they were very cool. And I think I can get that fit into an hour. Josh says, I missed the Savannah Lander. I've chatted to the blokes who run it. They seem like nice people. Definitely agree on that last sentence. Definitely going on the Savannah Lander when I'm in Queensland next. My grandparents took it years ago. Cool. Yes, Josh, being a 707 volunteer, knows all about the farewell trips that didn't end up being farewells. But we'll talk about that next week. Well, 2 weeks. And I'll hopefully remember to do the live stream on a Friday night like I always plan. But I literally just forgot yesterday. So one final piece of chat. I think Josh says, there used to be so many railway lines in Queensland. According to a bloke who worked at the Rail Museum, currently over 5,000 kilometres of track has been pulled. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, but at the same time, there's still quite a bit that is still left. So if you haven't experienced everything that there is to offer in Queensland, go do it, because the Westlander and Inlander specifically are in danger of being stopped. Josh says, unfortunately, they were before my time as a volunteer. Yeah, I thought they might have been, but at least one day I'll end up getting on the Sea Lake line. Well, you know what, Josh, there's probably going to be another farewell tour, so you can come on that one. But yes, 5 minutes later, we're ending it off. Thanks everyone for watching, and tune in Friday 2 weeks' time. And I'll have a normal video live on YouTube tomorrow morning. That will be in Hampton Park Food Market. Very cool place. And next Sunday, I'll have another video out, which is probably going to be Puffin Billy, the return of the NVG South African Garret. There's a little road map. I'll be saying as many goodbyes as John Farnham, John Farnham, or whatever his name is, and as many as there were farewell tours of the Sea Lake line. Okay, goodbye everyone. Hope you enjoyed. See you next time. Bye-bye.